that. So with that, that's the last of your little background, and we're going to have Chip come forward. How we're going to continue, we're going to go straight into Scripture. We're going to do a kind of a setting of the scene. We're going to read the passages and then reframe it for you. And so with that, let us begin with Genesis, that Sodom and Gomorrah story. You sodomites, you.
Okay, this is reading from Genesis 19, verses 1 and 2, and verses 4 through 8. And the version is the Message. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening. Lot was sitting at the city gate. He saw them and got up to welcome them, bowing before them and said, "Please, my friends, come to my house and stay the night. Wash up. You can rise early and be on your way refreshed." They said, "No, we'll sleep in the street." But Lot insisted. Before they went to bed, men came from all over the city of Sodom, young and old, descended on the house from all sides and boxed them in. They yelled to Lot, "Where are the men who are staying with you for the night? Bring them out so we can have our sport with them." Lot went out, barring the door behind him, and said, "Brothers, please, don't be vile. Look, I have 2 daughters, virgins. Let me bring them out. You can take your pleasure with them, but don't touch these men. They're my guests."
Wow. If there had to be probably any reference that has been used over and over again against gay individuals, it's probably the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And what I'm going to present is, what was the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah? Why did it evolve into this idea? And what does the Bible itself say that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is? Now, I'm going to be, if I do any extra readings, I'm going to be reading from my version, which I ended up with after King James. I started out with King James and ended up with the New International Version. And I stayed with that pretty much through my Bible college years. Just to give you a little background about myself, and that perspective, which was really great. I was thinking about it as Shirley was speaking. I'm kind of just the reverse. I grew up in a fundamentalist background. I was the only child who would go to church. Why? I don't know. I was just expected to go. I ended up enjoying it. And later in life, I wanted to be a pastor. And I went to Biola University in La Mirada, California. It's a very conservative, very Christian university. And it was there that I really delved into the scriptures, and it was also there that I got involved with ex-gay ministries. I was part of the Exodus group, trying to de-homosexualize myself. That's the best way to describe it. Homosexuality is a sin. I learned that early on, and this was a ministry that was designed to change that. And so I got involved with that, and I was involved with that for 8 years. Combination of Christian counseling, group counseling, trying desperately to be straight, for lack of a better term. All to no avail. It did not work. But one of the things that I struggled with after that is, how do I reconcile all of my teaching with my identity? And I'll tell you, as far as I was concerned, where I came up with, Shirley mentioned how the fundamentalist was like a sign of freedom to her. I read the Catholic Church's doctrine on homosexuality in the Catechism, and one of the things that it says, it's kind of an obscure left-handed way of saying, is that there's no point in changing them, in essence. I mean, that's a broad paraphrase. But they're not to change, but they're to remain celibate. To me, that was liberation. Because for years I was told, you can't be this way, you have to be straight in order for God to approve of you. So to hear that I didn't need to change was liberation for me. And I actually went into a big quest, and I delved deeply into Catholicism for a long time. And as a result, to make a short story as long as possible, I ended up at Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is home of the Joseph Campbell Memorial Library. And if any of you had seen the Bill Moyer series on PBS, The Power of Myth, his memorial library is at Pacifica, which is in Santa Barbara, California. And I got my graduate work in mythology and depth psychology from that institute. And there I learned, after 10 years of being out of the closet, how to integrate all of this for myself. So that gives you kind of a perspective of where I'm coming from and what I did with all of this material. Back to Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm just going to throw out a whole bunch, a lot of stuff, and like a good Italian, whatever sticks to the wall is what's good, okay? So I'm not Italian, by the way. It was just a reference. This story for a long time, by even literal Bible scholars, was considered a fable. I don't know if you all recognize that. They thought that the story was a myth. There was no evidence archaeologically that these cities ever existed. So many literalists, up until the 20th century, early 20th century, regarded the whole tale of Sodom and Gomorrah as a moral story. In other words, this was a morality tale. So I think that that's very interesting to note, that way up until around, I would say around 1932, that comes to mind, that this whole tale in the book of Genesis was considered a myth, even by literal Bible scholars, the ones that believed in a 6-day creation, okay, and the literal plagues, and the literal parting of the Red Sea, and the whole 9 yards. They thought Sodom and Gomorrah was a myth. Now that's very interesting. What changed their mind? Modern archaeology has discovered, of in all places, Iraq, Babylon, tablets of trade routes that were done to not just one city, not just 2 cities, but 5 cities, as are mentioned in the book of Genesis.